Okay, got the drum off this side. Let's go ahead at this point. And we're going to lightly clean this thing at this point. The dirtiness always scares everybody away. I did put plastic gloves on this. That can always help a little bit. Usually I don't, but just to show it. Another thing that I always do is down below, I've got a old cardboard box, plastic liner, throwed some floor dry and dirt that I keep around and so on like that to catch all the contaminants that's going to be falling off of this. Then going to take a can of brake cleaner with the end on that and just lightly hose things down. I do have a brush here, as we can see that it cleans him up pretty quickly in those areas like that. Now we'll clean a little bit more once we get it apart, but just to show, don't be afraid of the dirt or so on. We can hose it off, not blow it off. Blowing it off puts it into the air. We breathe the asbestos and everything else that's on that. I take the plastic knob off, I get a little bit more of a spray then to give it a good flushing. And at this point, what we're truly after then is going to be the adjuster mechanism. This does have a single spring on this unit. That with this single spring, it latches in one side, goes the whole way around, a horseshoe style spring to the other side. Let's get a shot this direction. And with this horseshoe style spring then, it's the only spring on it. And with only one spring, there's a lot less other components that can rattle and so on like that. But it's an extremely stiff spring to fight it to get it off, because this spring pushes in on the shoe and then brings the shoe back in also on this. Can be a little bit of a problem, but there is a special tool to do that. One other thing on this is of a leading trailing style brake, which means the bottoms are fixed. They never extend in or out down on the bottom of the shoes themselves. All the extension does happen on top of it, and with that extension on top of it, we've got a spring holding the two together, self-adjusting mechanism again, and the adjuster or the strut rod inside of this unit to keep pushing them apart. And that's literally what it does, is spreads it apart, spreads it apart, spreads it apart as it adjusts. One thing along with that, depending on the service of the vehicle, if it's had brake fluid changes and so on like that, when I turn this adjuster in and we bring these shoes back in, when I put new linings on, which will make the shoes come in, the piston and the cup inside the wheel cylinders will come back in also. If there was a lot of moisture or so on like that in the brake fluid, there could be corrosion pitting in this part of the bore here where there isn't any on the out of the bore where the cup is at right now, which means if you shove this back in, you might be getting the cup on some dirty surfaces and then have a brake leak later on after the vehicle leaves. So it's going to be a complete judgment call of you whether you want to replace the wheel cylinders at this time or not along with that. At this point then, we're going to go ahead and back this adjuster off. Let me get set up here so you can see what I got to do. It's painful, but we have to do it though. And along with that, I love my little hook pick to reach in and get a hold of the adjuster arm, pulling him out. And I'm just, because of the direction I got to go, this device works pretty good, so I'm going to ratchet this in until I bottom the adjuster out. That'll relieve as much spring tension as possible on the one that I'm bumping against and on the horseshoe spring down below, because again, it's pretty stiff. You could try to fight it with channel locks, vice grips, and get a hold of the spring and try jacking it around or so on, but possibility of bending it. And also the human arm is made to eat, which means when the vice grips and channel lock comes off, they're going to hit you right in the mouth and you'll lose a couple front teeth. Again, I'm backing this off till this adjuster bottoms off. You can see how far I gotta go, but that's because it made up for the shoes wearing out and a small amount being removed from the drum from the stopping purpose of that. Shoes are consumable on this. These shoes are of equal length, so there's really not a front and a back in that respect on a leading trailing. but these shoes do have a emergency brake cable and actuator on the rear part of the shoe, on the rear shoe itself. We'll address that later once we get this spring unhooked and so on how to get it unlatched on the emergency brake part. Again, we're relieving the pressure here. Take this down till it doesn't go anymore. Makes life a whole lot easier. Everybody runs away from these, but I want to be the guy that gets all of them sent to him. And again, you can see it's not very dirty. I've washed all the dust away. This vehicle had 65,000 miles on it. We probably could have got another 40,000 out of these shoes. Kicked it up to 100,000 mile life, but I'm changing them for this video itself then on there. So I back this off. Now, first thing I want to do is get rid of this spring on top and get rid of the strut up on top. I can do that with the horseshoe still in. So I'm going to take a pair of vice grips, and again, be careful of the mouth. This is a Danny spring though. This one is not heavy. And I'm going to pull that off, making sure that I remember that the hook is which direction the hook lays in accordance with the eyelet on it. I'm going to lay everything in a circular pattern or a straight pattern just like it is on the vehicle. I'm then going to take our brake adjuster itself off. Half moon on top of him that slides over top of this pin in there. Of course, we've got this little flange right there that the eyelet of the spring went across. And then the inside of this is what actually pushes on the star wheel. These can get worn enough that they don't have a sharp enough edge that will work and catch on the star wheel itself. So always inspect that to make sure that it's not worn or rusted out. But again, pretty darn good plating on this thing to look like this after 8 years and 65,000 miles on this vehicle. So that guy looks good shape there. Next is going to be the strut rod. And on this strut rod, we got to remember which ends are which on this. This end has the threads on it. This end is actually the nut end of this. This vehicle has the emergency brake on one side. The emergency lever is on the back. But on the opposite side, which we're on the passenger side now, this lever is on the front. Reason for doing that, that's theoretical. It gives you the same amount of parking brake when you're facing downhill as when you're facing uphill on that. So one shoe will bite in more and so on like that. So I'm going to remember which way these slots all went in this strut rod. We can see we have a deep groove here, but notice how the prong on this side's longer than that one. So the short prong went inboard of the shoe. When I come to this side, notice I have several cutouts on that. One, the small one, is for the self-adjuster arm that we just took off. The next one goes over top of the emergency brake lever and the shoe itself in regards to this. And with that, when we pull the emergency brake lever this direction, what it does is pushes against this, which shoves the strut rod back, shoving the back shoe against the drum. And once the back shoe hits against the drum, this becomes a pivot point and it fulcrums through this pin, then shoving the front shoe against the drum right there. So that's how our emergency brake system actually works on the lever system there then. We can take this apart and let's slide this guy apart here then just to look at what does move and what doesn't move. Of course, our adjuster on this one has left-handed threads, which means if I turn it to the right, it comes out. Don't get these mixed up from side to side. It will be opposite threads of each other. I always take these out, maybe wire wheel the threads on this, and of course never seize along with that. The nut end, or the side that allows it to slip then, has this pin that slips in there, and it needs to be free to rotate, so never seize works well on that. And it does have a mechanism to keep it from this end from rotating through this little tab unit there. You see we've got the lock tab there, a high one there. We've got a large cutout here on this pin, a short one. So when I go together, the short one gets this put in there. Let me see if I can bring that up there. and then the long one goes on the bottom of that cutout like that to keep this from rotating around on that. Okay, alright, so there's our strut assembly. Very simple on that. Next we got to get in and relieve the tension on our spring down below. Let me find a comfortable position here then for this, and we're going to use a tool. This one I got off of Snap-on. Lots of people sell them and so on like that, but it does make the job easier. It does keep from bending backing plates and whatnot there. Now there's two of these devices, one for each side. One, you've got an all thread with a T-handle, and on the end of this is a hook. The other is a T-handle with an eyelet. Now the hook goes through the eyelet, as we'll see what it does here in a little bit, but I can bring the spring out square out and then keep it square then also with this unit coming in out. The bar system, one side's going to sit on the axle, the other has two cutout grooves inside of him, and that's dependent on whether it's large or small brakes, as in being like an S10 or so on like that, or a car, versus being a truck or so on like that there then. So we're going to take this guy, and I'm going to work him around here then, if I can keep from getting my arm in the way, and taking away the light. And the hook is then going to go underneath of the spring, so I'll back him out. Get the hook under there, maybe. Of course it wants to rotate. And then the bar mechanism comes out. And right on the back side of this guy over here then is where he sits on the backing plate itself. So we do need a good backing plate to support this unit. I'm going to free these up. There it all snapped. Snapped right there into the backing plate. I'll show you in a little bit. I did take the inside one. I'm going to bring these in gently, evenly against each other. And there we go on that. Let's see if we can get a good shot of what we just did. And right here what we've done then again is we're resting on the backing plate back here. We then come out with this bar. It comes over and rests on the axle, and then I have the ability to pull the spring in or out this way or back and forth. And back and forth is all that I'm going to have to do once I am centered in the hole inside the spring. So I've got that side. Now time to do the other side in on this. And same setup on that. It gives me ability to hook both sides of this, get these T-handles backed out, hook in, and bring this, again latching into my backing plate. Hopefully your backing plate isn't rusted out enough that you don't have a ledge for it to go into. And now, at this point, I am going to take and slide this over. My spring is facing the, or pulling in on the shoe itself then, so I'm going to wiggle it around right there. Let's get a good shot of this so you can get a really good idea of what I'm attempting to accomplish. Get some light there. Now if I tighten the one on the left, the T-handle on the left here, look how that spring's allowing that to come away, and the spring's actually centering up, loosening up my shoe at this time. So then, of course, what I'm going to do is tighten this one, which brings the spring out and allows the shoe to come away from the backing plate. I'll have to keep checking my distance there. And once I get enough distance, I'll be able to slide the shoe out from behind of the spring without even taking the spring itself off. And there it is off of there. If I go to the other side, instead of fighting it around, this tool works very nicely for this. I'm going to pull it away a little. There, I can get the center. I'm pulling him away. Now, this shoe has emergency brakes, so it's going to have to go out the bottom side, the way the cable runs. Get enough clearance on it. And of course I'm going to have to get my hands down under there then, so I'm going to light. And the cable does tie us up just a skosh down here then. And the shoe will come out then at that point right there then, folks, okay? Now I'm going to turn the camera off and we're going to look at the emergency brake cable and getting it unlatched right there then underneath.